Welcome to Rise, Season 3, Episode 8. From Switzerland, where pharmacies are now distributing COVID testing equipment, and where my local trampoline park was open and welcomed my son the other day, but where restaurants remain closed, I'm Professor Demian Hodari of EHL Lausanne.
And a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from across the world. Thank you for joining us on Rise, and thank you for joining me in my airport hotel quarantine from lovely Heathrow Airport. We are day 357, Demian, of our 100-day project, just a matter of days away from the first anniversary of Rise. Who would have thought? And it's amazing how the same way that Rise has sought to connect the people around the travel, tourism, and hospitality world, in the last 2 weeks, our shared world, all of us, have experienced a number of events that have brought us all together. We've recently had observances of Easter, Pesach, and of Holi. At the moment, the Commonwealth is observing and celebrating the life of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and tomorrow starts the observance of Ramadan. So as we've seen this past year, everyone is in this all together. We are delighted you are with us every single week. We thank you for joining us. And now is your chance to send through those questions for today's program, because we have another really interesting, really fun one. Demian, what's on the menu?
Well, today we're making a meal of it, Anita. And for those of us who subsist on more than just champagne, understanding how food consumption has changed over the past year and what this means for the future is a relevant and interesting question. So we're looking today not only at what's changed over the past year, but more importantly, how is that changing the way we are going to eat and what we're going to eat going forward. We've got really two absolute experts with us to discuss that in a little while. But as always, we like to begin by hearing from our audience, and we've got a related question for everybody today for our first poll. So which of the following are you most likely to continue in this next normal?
Let's see
All right.
what happens.
Let's see those results. All right.
Wow.
So far and away cooking from scratch. So interesting. I know you have never tried that, but for the rest of us who do like to cook, I would agree, right? I've cooked more over the past year than maybe before, and some new recipes and some new abilities that I'll continue.
But in fairness, someone has to eat and appreciate the food that is cooked from scratch. So I am here as your audience, Demian, not just your co-host.
Interesting as well that fast food 0%, and I'm wondering if that might be a little bit skewed by our audience, less maybe in the US today, more European and in Asia. So curious to see what our experts think about that in a little while. But we've got some time till we get to them. And over to you, Anita.
And now we move into a really valuable part of Rise, and it's all about where in the world are we? And if we look at April 12th, where is the world of travel, tourism, and hospitality, and where is our place in it? The first chart that I have, I thought was really valuable to show. 2 weeks ago, the WTTC released the Economic Impact Report for 2020. What exactly happened in our industry? And it was amazing to see clearly the distinct impact on GDP and on the economic growth of our sector and the impact it's had. Distinctly, as you can see from this, C being COVID-19 and the severity of its impact vis-a-vis the other crisis. However, look at what's circled in red, 340,000. That's ultimately the number of jobs that we're anticipating coming back when we look at the growth that's going to take place. So 340 million being the total number of jobs we anticipate in travel and tourism. And Demian, our executives and residents in the recruitment sector have always said on Rise, when the rebound happens, it's going to happen rapidly. So as we slowly start opening up the world with vaccines rolling out, the jobs are going to start rolling out as well. That is a great sign of confidence, which takes us to my next slide, which I really wanted to show. Because if you think about the final episode of season 2, we talked about the nature of giving and how people ultimately, at a time of incredible challenge, have found that they recognize their blessing and therefore the desire to do more for others. I love this because Fidelity Charitable just released their giving report for last year. This is based on over 250,000 donors that they have. And what they saw was that last year, compared to the year before, 24% increase in donor recommended grants, a huge amount of money that people felt they wanted to give to others, whether it's for healthcare, for feeding schemes, whatever it might be. 170,000 unique charities, and more importantly, normally donors will indicate, this is what I want to donate, and I want it ascribed to this cause. 2/3 are saying, no, use it wherever it's needed. The people who are trusted for actually channeling those funds are trusted to make a decision about what exactly local communities are needing to keep going during these challenging times. I love this because it shows that hearts are still open, even if fears are there. Over to you.
Always such a good job presenting positive news, Anita. I've got, well, depending on how you look at it, some positive news. I want to focus on one specific point here. This is from earnest research, and this was reported in the Wall Street Journal. If you look at that orange line, it's basically telling us that reservations for short-term rentals, the Airbnb and VRBOs of the world, in the first 2 months of 2021, surpassed that of the first 2 months of 2020 pre-pandemic. And what this is basically telling us is, while people are still not traveling in the numbers that they were before, those that are staying away from home are increasing as a percentage of their nights away from home, those short-term rentals at the expense of hotels. So if you're owning one of these units or you're an investor in Airbnb, great news. I do think the hotel industry is growing even more concerned than before, as a lot of people have tried this type of accommodation for the first time over the last year, and whether that's going to continue at the expense of hotels going forward, definitely something on the minds of our hoteliers.
Indeed.
I'm foregoing my second data point today because we're fortunate enough that once again, Jan Freitag from STR, a CoStar company, is with us to present quite a bit of really interesting data on the hotel sector. So let's turn it over to Jan.
Hello, and thanks so much for having me back. First things, Anita, really enjoyed your moderating at the WTO event that was online a couple of weeks ago. Thanks for doing that. That was just really, you had a really good flow with the group. Thank you. Secondarily, got my first shot, got the Pfizer shot that is now available here in Tennessee to everybody over 16. Of course, we don't like to call it Pfizer, we call it BioNTech because we all know that a German company developed it. And then lastly, let's talk a little bit about data. That's why I'm here today. I want to share with you 4 slides in fairly rapid succession. I have, over the last couple of weeks and months, talked to a lot of operators, owners, lenders, and so. And whenever somebody says, oh, here's all the good stuff, somebody says, yeah, but what about these things? And if you bring up, sort of clouds in the horizon, somebody says, yeah, but what about all these good things? So I wrote 2 articles they're available on Hotel News Now, the bull case and the bear case for the US hotel industry. And I just want to throw 4 slides at you that can also work globally. I think what we're seeing here in the US might be a precursor for what's going on in other countries as vaccinations get distributed. So let's just start with a clear overlay here of, number of vaccinated arms goes up and RevPAR growth is also increasing. And what you're seeing here is that the index compared to 2019, is just slowly rising back to the levels of 2019. That is exactly what we were expecting in the US and also what we're expecting globally, right? Because if you have more shots in the arm, that gets the leisure traveler out there in force and then also gets CEOs of companies much more comfortable getting their people out on the road for corporate transient and then finally for corporate group demand. Secondarily, what we've seen here in the US is that the American consumer last year, because they didn't really travel, saved a lot of money, right? We all bought the stuff that we needed. It was delivered to us, like we joke, like we don't need any more Pelotons, it's this exercise bike. We don't need any more stuff. What we're all craving now are experiences, And what we're seeing in the United States, that we almost have $2 trillion of savings accumulated between January 1, 2020 and today. And we think that that is really going to be a tailwind for leisure demand in the United States in the summer and beyond. Of course, on the other side, there are two data points that I want to share that sort of give you pause. And the first one is, of course, that in the United States and globally, there are still a lot of hotels that are closed, especially in Europe. And what we're going to see is that once those are open, at the same time, we're going to have new hotels that are opening, that are being constructed right now. And all of those are going to come into the same market where demand is a little bit depressed. And what are they going to do, right? How are they going to price? Is this going to be a race to the bottom? Are they going to hold rate? Are they going to be rapidly increasing rates? Definitely very, very interesting to note. And then lastly, international travel. What you see here is just that the international travel numbers for the US just fell off a cliff, in 2020. And we don't really think that's going to change very much, right? Because we don't really know what the protocols are for get people who are non-Americans back into the United States. And do they really want to come, after America had sort of a sketchy or a spotty response, to the virus. Of course, we now have many more vaccinations or people vaccinated. But still, the question is, so how do we travel as an American if I want to come, to Switzerland? How does that actually work? Do I have to quarantine? Do I have to show a vaccination passport? Do I have to do a rapid test? Do I have to do all three? I think all of this is still going to be worked on. Obviously, the WTO has an opinion, the WTTC has an opinion. There are a lot of entities and government entities that want to push international travel forward. But what the details look like is still to be determined, which I think is going to put a damper on international travel going forward. Overall, we're very optimistic. More vaccinations means more room demand, but I'll be back with more data, hopefully more encouraging data as the year progresses. Thanks so much for having me.
He always brings, really insightful interpretation of the data. And I really appreciate Jan taking the time to do this for us, and also STR partnering with Rise. Great stuff for everybody.
It's such a great partnership. And to your point, he's so comfortable in the role now. I think you might want to be cautious, Demian, of your co-host seat being challenged.
I would love for him to guest host for me one day. I could go fishing.
Thank you, Jan, for making the stats very human. That's really special.
Yeah, and it's interesting. As we look at my headlines, you'll see the second one sort of parallels a little bit what Jan came to us with without us having spoken about it. But my first headline of the week is again about hotel industry and tourism. And there are two headlines basically talking about reconsidering and reshaping the guest experience or the tourist experience going forward, right? We've been talking for a year now about hotels making some basic changes, right? Everything from new cleaning policies to grab and go breakfast to, book your room on your phone and bypass the front desk. But there are some other issues that are at stake as well. We want to make sure that people are thinking about this at a more corporate level, right? We're seeing many more independent hotels switching to the brands. We're seeing increased consolidation amongst hotel companies. We just saw Sonesta buying RLH, Red Lion Hotels, et cetera. So there are some fundamental changes going on in the hotel industry, both at the property level and at the corporate level as a result of the pandemic. And I don't think we're still very early in that. And a lot of that is going to be driven by customer demand and the hotel industry responding to that, just as tourism destinations need to do it. And I just thought this was a great article talking about Amsterdam being able to use last year as a pause to reconsider not only how many tourists it wants, but what kind of tourists it wants. What does it want to provide these tourists in order to give everybody the best experience, while at the same time making sure that people that live in Amsterdam have a great quality of life and are not bombarded and overwhelmed by the number of tourists. And I think we're going to see this again throughout other areas. We talked a little bit about the Caribbean islands needing to rethink reliance on cruises or on tourism, and can they find other ways to diversify their income. So again, two headlines from this week, both talking in ways about this important issue. And this one's really not a headline, it's 4 headlines, and I'll let people look at those on their own. But the basic point of this, and why I showed this, was as I was searching the New York Times for recent articles on tourism, all four are really basically saying the same thing. It's very confusing out there. A little bit what Jan was saying. Do I need to quarantine? Do I not? Am I allowed to go? Do I have to quarantine when I come home? And we've been talking about this again for about 10 months. And my point being, we are not much clearer now. In fact, I think it's more confusing now, because 10 months ago was you can't go anywhere. And now it's, well, maybe you can, maybe you can't, maybe you can, but you can't, depending on where you're from. And so even if getting vaccinated, even if borders are opening up, until legislation is clear, until there's a uniform policy, until people feel confident with making these plans, I don't really think we're going to see the rebounding in international travel. Regardless, it's just too confusing and too risky for our wallets and our health at this point.
Great, great, great choices. And it's interesting how we're starting to connect in many ways to the whole narrative around travel and tourism, which is why my first one is the announcement that came from Prime Minister Ardern about opening up New Zealand, Australia travel from the 18th of April. This is another one of those hopeful ones, because it's saying slowly, slowly we're going to be opening up. But exactly as you said, Demian, and as Jan said, it's all about confidence and trust in the regulations. When people talk about the safety of travel now, they're not necessarily talking about the virus. It's the safety of the regulations and the policies not changing for the negative. And I thought that was really interesting, because the government was saying, fantastic, people from Australia can now travel across to New Zealand. They don't have to quarantine. However, should there be a change in policy, it's going to be up to the expense and the inconvenience of the traveler. The government stands back. And I can tell you, being in a hotel quarantine, don't be disguised by the flowers. Jonathan Worsley, one of our execs in residence and a colleague, sent those to me. I nicked one of the ice buckets from housekeeping downstairs, but it's 10 days in a room, no out, no air, 3 meals a day in a brown paper bag, which makes me fearful for the hotel brands that put their names on these government regulated hotels. How does that affect the experience in the long term? So it's a very interesting one, but I thought this was great from the point of view of where there is healthcare confidence, slowly we're getting travel and tourism confidence. However, then we have my next headline, which goes to some of the passing down the pendulum of we're slowly opening up, but please God, don't do it too quickly. On the 5th of April, there was a match that was played. It was a baseball match between Texas Rangers and Toronto Blue Jays, the original team from my home city. Looking at it from the point of view of 100% capacity, 38,000 people. It's an open air stadium, yes. However, 38,000 people side by side, including kids, throws out the whole open air concept. We'll be talking about this a little bit more, but what I found fascinating was not just the fact that it happened, how it unnerved people seeing it happening, because a lot of places and around the world are still in serious trouble, and this just poses an overt risk. So I thought this was very interesting. So
I just wanted to say, great choice, Anita. I just wanted to clarify for our American audience that we do recognize that it is a baseball game and not a baseball match.
Rude, shame.
As a baseball coach of my son's team, I needed to make sure that people know that I know the difference.
I'm impressed. So, and special video choice, especially for this episode, because we're talking about food innovation. And I thought, wait a minute, innovation's not just about the product, it's the how it goes out to market. And I loved this campaign. So, served just for you, Demian.
In a hospitality world of more and more closed doors, we're throwing ours wide open, inviting small business owners to collaborate with top talent from Coca-Cola Great Britain, Costa Coffee, Innocent, and Coca-Cola European partners. They'll be opening up to new ideas, new tactics, and new connections, making each and every one open to the possibilities of the new normal.
So I'm really looking forward to just seeing the business do what it's supposed to do and serve the people that come to it.
This is Project Open, the Business Accelerator Program.
Very classy, because if there's anything COVID-19 has taught us, we're all in this together. And so we all have to work together to get out of it steadily, especially the SMEs.
Yeah, great choice. And I think this is one of these recurring themes that we're going to see going forward. The way we look at partnerships between the large companies and either their suppliers or their distributors or their customers, and how they have to work together, not just during this year, but how the way they've learned to work together during this year will impact them going forward. So great choice. It's time for our second poll. And so I'm going to allow Grace to work her magic, and I want to give people a little extra instructions with this one. As you can see, we want to ask, when you compare it to a year ago, are you eating? And then you'll see there's 4 sets: pair 1, pair 2, pair 3, and pair 4. Please choose one from each pair, everybody. All right, let's see those results. All right. So pair 1, less calories, more healthy, more basic as opposed to more exotic. That surprises me a little bit, and pretty close, but still people are trying new recipes. I guess I'm a little surprised. I would have thought people were so bored of the same old food, we would have seen more exotic foods, more different food. I don't know what you think.
I love this. I must say, this is really interesting. And I'd be curious to see how the less calories, more healthy has changed compared to at the beginning of COVID-19, when so much comfort food and sugar was being consumed. I'm a little bit concerned, though. I'm not sure how I'd answer this, because there's no more liquids, less food. So
I thought we would do that one next week. All right, let's see what our executives and residents have to say about this, as well as many of the other questions we've got for them. So with us today, I'm really happy that I was able to get one of my dearest friends in the world, Barb Stuckey, who's the President and Chief Innovation Officer at Matson, to join us, and Alex Hardy, Regional Director, Consumer Market Intelligence, General Mills, who's also someone I've met here while living in Switzerland, and our kids go to school together. Barb, and Alex, I'm just gonna try to summarize what each of you actually do in your jobs, and you correct me if I'm wrong. Barb, you basically invent new foods, right? You are an innovation expert at creating foods. And Alex, you are telling your company, here's how people are eating, here's what they're eating, and here's how this is going to change going forward. So obviously, the 2 perfect people for today's show. Let me ask you guys, just to start off, and Barb, I'll start with you. What did you think of that result? Is that in line with what you've seen in terms of healthier eating, less eating, and the people kind of reverting back to traditional foods? Is that what you've noticed?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Well, first of all, thank you, Rice, for having me in Matson. We're thrilled to be here. It makes sense to me, because when you're eating at home, you have a lot more control over what you're eating than when you're eating out of home. So to me, that resonates. I think that the other thing that we're hearing is that people are really watching what they're eating with regard to immunity, which makes total sense as well, because we all know that everybody's trying to stay well these days, and there's a big virus that we're all worried about. But I think that really just sort of it balloons to other things in our life, trying to be healthier about what we're eating. I think that's also where you see a little bit of the shift in both thinking and behavior around eating a plant-based diet. So we know that needle has moved a lot during the pandemic. So 71% eating healthier, that totally makes sense for me and what we're seeing at Matson.
Great. And Alex, is your data suggesting the same thing? And maybe you can elaborate, are there specific types of foods or groups of products that you are seeing becoming more popular during the last year that you also think will continue going forward?
Yeah, sure. No, we have absolutely seen some of that. I think some of this might be a little bit different as well. So we saw some very long-term trends around people generally eating less calories per kilo that they eat. And then in March last year, this long-term downward trend suddenly spiked upwards, and people were just, I think Anita mentioned, were just eating like it was going out of fashion. So, and then after a few months realized, I can't keep doing this. And so it kind of came back down again. So we saw this kind of like wavy effect in terms of kind of what people were eating. The one that surprised me was around kind of new recipes versus existing, because I think generally people were saying, it will vary by person, but I had 5 kind of go-to recipes that I would cook. Now I need 10 because we're at home every night. I'm cooking, 3 meals, or I'm having 3 meals a day at home, 7 days a week. I'm not traveling anywhere. I'm not eating out. And so people were looking for new stuff and looking for inspiration. And we heard a lot of people talk about what we called kitchen fatigue, where it's like, oh, I just can't think about what to have for dinner tonight again. And that kind of really kicked in. So I think the bit about inspiration was probably a little bit different from what we've heard.
Thanks.
Brilliant. A question for you both. And I'm going to also invite all of our viewers to please send through your questions, because this is a really fun one. This is a part of the experience of the last year that we've all had. But a question to you both, because in my old Coca-Cola and Unilever days on the food and beverage side, innovation takes a long time. And as we've seen, people are going against fast food, but now towards the words healthy, more balanced, more thoughtful food. That has a massive impact on innovation, life cycles. And what have you seen in terms of how companies, whether it's the General Mills or the smaller businesses even, have had to address accelerated demand for a change towards healthier menus when they're offering products at scale? How do they work around that? Alex, on the GM side.
No, I have to start with that one. I'm sure Barb has a point of view on this, but we've seen, I mean, in some categories like have been growing at 30-40% because people are cooking at home, and in others we've seen the opposite trend where people are saying I'm moving away from those, and we don't, in many places we don't have that kind of capacity just sitting on hand. So actually just getting the regular core products on the shelf every week was the biggest challenge that we faced. When it comes to innovation, you're absolutely right. It does, for companies like General Mills, it takes a long time to get through kind of different phases of projects, and could take a couple of years, from start to finish. So for sure, we didn't have a load of kind of innovation sitting there, ready to go for people, as most big companies would have done. But I think the underlying trends are there. I think for some of these things, it's maybe accelerated, what people were doing, how they were shopping, how they were eating and cooking. I think some of the things that we have either launched, through this period or have coming up probably would have been right during this time, and probably right if this thing had not happened. So I wouldn't say it's massively changed there. And again, people are looking for new innovations, things out there just to try, because as I say, they're eating so much at home now. They're always looking for something new and different. And that's why we've seen things like, food boxes, things like Hello Fresh and those kind of things really accelerate again, because people are just saying, I want to try new things, and I'm running out of ideas myself.
And it was entertainment for the kids as well.
Absolutely. So we saw, I mean, everybody's kind of heard of the big baking trend last year, but everyone's baking bread and cakes and things like that. And it wasn't just because they wanted bread, it's about keeping the kids entertained while they're out of school. And so we saw a big spike there. And again, people at home eating more at home, they're looking for snacks at home. And so we did see a big spike there, but that's kind of has tailed off as time has gone on.
Thanks.
And Barb, from your side?
Yeah, and Anita, you mentioned the word healthy, and what's interesting to us is, what does that mean? So for different companies and different consumers, it means totally different things. So one of the most just widespread trends that we're seeing is a definition of eating healthy as eating clean, meaning trying to find foods that are more towards whole, or if it is more of a packaged food, at least looking at the ingredient statement and wanting to see ingredients that are familiar, that you know how to pronounce, that might be things that are in your kitchen cabinet. So a lot of clean eating equals clean living, right? So also we see people choosing foods that are better for the environment, and they feel like that's eating healthier, whether it's healthy for me or healthy for our planet. So, and we've seen actually during the pandemic that a lot more people are saying that they're making food choices based on its impact on the environment. And then, to your question about small companies versus large. So at Mattson, we do product innovation, and then we do development and scale up and commercialization. So we have clients that range from the big guys like General Mills to startups. And where the pandemic was really challenging for our clients was at the smaller end of things. Because if you think about what Alex just said about the big companies really just struggling to get products onto the shelf, those buyers, those retail grocery buyers were just, I mean, they were trying to keep things on shelf for consumers. So they didn't have as much time or attention to give to the smaller startups who they were challenged to get meetings with these retail buyers. So we are feeling right now in our business, this pent up demand for innovation services in our case. But I think the consumer also is looking for innovation for all the reasons we've just talked about. They've been at home, they're looking for not just new foods and new recipes and new ways of cooking like meal kits, but they're looking for new flavors and new types of food and true innovation. So we think 2021 and 2022 especially is going to be a banner year for food and beverage innovation.
Hey, Barb, let me ask a follow-up. So let's see if we can get a bit more specific without obviously giving away anything confidential, obviously. Are there specific developments coming out of this past year, either in terms of, oh, food needs to be delivered more, so restaurants are coming to you asking you to help them take existing foods, find a way for it to arrive to the home better? Or are there foods that don't really aren't really easily transportable, and thus we need new products that we can sell for carry out and delivery? So I'm trying to get a little bit more specifics in terms of how will the pandemic drive this innovation going forward, besides the healthier side?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, we work on both sides of that. We work for food service manufacturers as well as restaurant operators. And I want to use just a case study of something that is sold in the US, at least. I'm not sure about elsewhere. And we can't take credit for this, but we're in awe of it. So if you think about the thing that is probably the most disappointing when you order it for delivery at home, it's probably fries, right? Frites, French fries, whatever you want to call them. And so if you think about that as just a proxy for every other food that gets delivered, there's a company called McCain that has done some research in developing a French fry that was designed and scaled for delivery. And so what they've done is, I can't give anything away because I don't know exactly what the technology was that they used, but by focusing on the fact that people are ordering more, they're disappointed in a lot of the quality of the food that comes in, and focusing their innovation efforts on how do we optimize that experience. And we think this is an opportunity across the food service industry to really focus on the packaging and how packaging enables delivery, to focus on the ingredients and the technology that you're using to make foods. Because in our business, we work in both food service as well as retail. And it really is kind of taking the technologies of packaged foods and all of that, how to stabilize food and how to create foods that have a shelf life, and bringing that to fresh prepared foods from restaurants as they're delivered to consumers. Because that 30 minutes to an hour of time between when you order and when you get food at your house, that is a shelf life of sorts, right? So everyone is thinking about that now, because this shift in on-premise dining to off-premise dining in the restaurant sector, this is not going to go away. I mean, it has become the new normal, and consumers love it. They love the convenience. They love the ability to get a delivered experience. And they love the splurge, right? After those, like Alex said, those 5 recipes in your repertoire, you really need some relief. And sometimes the relief is in something that's just really truly delicious and indulgence.
Sunny, I want to pick up something that you've actually both talked about. And I find it fascinating that there's innovation, as you've said, in product, but also innovation in experience on the delivery side. And Demian spoke in the past about pizza boxes. And if you look at how, again, food has become activity, engagement, education, and entertainment at home, especially with little people. So that great little company called Eat to Explore, which sends the food boxes with the spices and the maps and the travel guides. You go get the perishables, and it allows people to discover countries. So you get the Kenya kit and you get to explore what Kenya is all about and eat some of the spices. So the travel education and edutainment almost, which is just so funky. But it's amazing how, to your point, Barb, about the definition of the word healthy, the definition of the word innovation has also expanded. I'd love to understand, because I think one of the reasons why this category is so interesting is that we're all the consumers. We've all been grounded. We've all been at home. We're all sick of our own cooking. I'd be curious to know from each of you, what is the funkiest innovation you've seen this past year, either product, delivery, or experience? Barb, from your side.
Funkiest innovation. Well, I mean, the thing that comes to mind that we're really incredibly excited about, it sort of gets at that desire to change your diet for the environment, for environmental purposes. And this is something that we're calling cultivated meat. And cultivated meat is the idea of doing away with traditional agriculture when it comes to animal meat. And so instead of moving to plants, which we think that's going to be a permanent change in behavior, and people are going to start eating more plant-based foods more often, what cultivated food does is it allows us to eat those animal products without having to raise and slaughter the animal. Now, this is not plant-based, this is actual animal meat. But what it does is takes essentially a cell sample of the meat, whether it's chicken, beef, pork, seafood, you name it. And that meat then is grown in a cultivator and multiplied and then harvested from the cultivator to make food that talks and walks and talks and tastes like beef or a burger or chicken or seafood, you name it. And so this technology, while not fully scaled, we're starting to see little bits and pieces of it pop up in the market. And we're working on some of this in our lab in the San Francisco Bay Area. And to me, it is the future of food. And so, you know, whether that's funky or cool or scary, it depends kind of who you are and where you are. And that is one of the things that we get most excited about, because just think of the impact of that kind of technology.
Indeed. And Alex?
Yeah, I think a couple for me. I think one is probably around kind of how, and again, it was a trend before. I think it was one of these that's been accelerated, but how immunity kind of, you know, boosters coming into food and people thinking about that is going to change. And I think that's one. Again, it's not one you can just turn around overnight, but it's one I think we'll see a lot more of, kind of nature and science coming together in terms of kind of how we look at food. And I think the other one is, again, it was a trend before and it's just massively accelerated. It is about e-commerce and delivery and the different methods that people are using, but also the quality of offer that they're coming with. So I just read earlier today, in fact, you know, the Gusto food boxes, so they're like HelloFresh type thing, are now offering a premium version of that, where basically they'll chop up all the vegetables for you, and it's about £1.50 per serving to come through. But it's just little ways of kind of change, you know, saying you're still cooking it yourself, but we'll just make it a little bit easier for you, and you know, and again add a bit of cost to it. But I think the way people are getting those kind of things to people and kind of hearing their needs, you know, we saw people spending a lot more time cooking and then actually pulling back from that a bit and just saying, okay, I've done all that cooking, you know, give me a hand, and they're responding well. So I think how that's evolved has been incredible.
Indeed.
If I could say something to just dovetail that. So because we're in the development business, it's fascinating to us that we are now having companies come to us, whether they're startups and entrepreneurs or whether they're big food. And the assignment that we are given is to design food for delivery. So, and this is even packaged food. So design it for e-commerce or even just traditional grocery delivery from bricks and mortar. But if you think about it, the way the food is packaged and merchandised and the way it appears on a screen where you're ordering it, all of these things come into play if people are moving their behavior from walking through an aisle in a grocery store to doing their shopping on a screen. So, I mean, these are fundamental changes that are not going to go away. And so while we're seeing a lot of our clients really focusing on this, we think in the near future, it's just going to be the price of admission to get into the food and beverage business for every product that is launched.
Yeah, and I think some of these things have been forced on people to say, well, I can't get out, I have to do it this way. But if the experience is good, you stick with it. And I think that's really what's happened with, you know, with e-commerce. It's opened up to perhaps more rural consumers or older consumers that weren't necessarily doing it before, and they've stuck with it.
Great point.
Let me ask a slightly similar question, but we've talked a little bit here about delivery, food at home, buying food in the supermarkets, what's going to change, new products. What about eating out in restaurants? And let's take the in-restaurant dining, because I imagine the whole ghost kitchen thing just refers back to this delivery. So maybe Alex, let's start with you. I know that you guys, General Mills, obviously you provide ingredients and food to restaurants as well as to consumers through supermarkets, et cetera. Are you seeing a change going forward in how restaurants are going to operate in terms of in-house dining as a result of the pandemic, or will nothing change, or do people want to eat faster, so food needs to be cooked quicker? Or are you seeing any changes on that end?
It's a good question, and I think a bit to your point earlier about kind of travel rules. It's like, well, how are things going to evolve here, and where's it going to settle down? I think we're looking ahead like everyone else, really, in terms of kind of how things will evolve and how out of home will manage. To be honest, most of our business actually is in home. We do have kind of some shops and some out of home service. So for us, our focus has been very much on kind of what people bring into the home or what they get delivered home. But I think in terms of kind of eating out, I think kind of generally, it feels like there is a wave of people who are saying the first day things open, I'm out there, and we've seen British pubs open or English pubs open today, booked out despite the snow. There'll be a wave of people wanting to do that. But most people, I think we've heard, have been a bit more cautious about going back and saying, yeah, I will go back, but maybe I won't be the first. So I think there'll be a kind of a slow recovery back. Now, what that then means in terms of what the experience is for people, I guess we await to see how that evolves.
Okay, and Barb, let me ask you a slightly different version of the question. If we assume that people are cooking more at home, they've learned how to cook, they've got all these recipes. Second, they have all these new places they can order delivery from, the ghost kitchens as well as restaurants didn't use to deliver. Does this mean for restaurants to recapture on-premise dining in the future with, let's say, increased competition from cooking at home and increased competition from delivery? Do restaurants need to rethink what kind of food they're serving and the way they're serving it? Or will just the experience of going back to a restaurant be enough and they don't really need to change and innovate their service or food?
No, I think it's a great question. The game has been upped. I mean, people are going to be looking for a truly differentiated, experiential visit to a restaurant because we have to talk about food safety, right? I mean, this whole pandemic has brought food safety to the forefront in ways that we haven't had in the past. And frankly, those of us in the food business don't want it to be out there in the forefront. If you do your job well, the safety of your food is transparent. I should say invisible. People don't even think about it, but it is going to be an issue moving forward. So first and foremost, consumers want to feel like their environment is safe, that the food they're eating is safe. This gets at a lot of individual servings and paper menus that get thrown out and frequent sanitation procedures. So all of that needs to be in place before you even get to the experience. But we're kind of thinking of it as the beginning of the roaring 20s, right? If you think about it as being after Prohibition, when people had been starved for so long of these experiences of going out and celebrating with alcohol. It's the same thing here. People are going to want to go out and celebrate with food or food and beverage. And so if the restaurant operators can really think about not just food form, but also service and how they differentiate service and how they differentiate the flavors that they're delivering to their guests who, you know, have been eating the same thing again and again and again. There's just so much opportunity for innovation. So people are going to be out there. Now, what we see here happening as, you know, California is getting ready to open back up, is the demand is far outstripping the supply. So I will say to everyone who's listening to this, if you want to eat out, make your reservation now for the 4 weeks in advance that you're going to need to get a table at your local full service restaurant, because that's going to continue for the short term for sure, that demand will outstrip supply.
Dave, and I like the fact that you say 4 weeks, because firstly, the supply is going to be much less in terms of spacing. But secondly, it's going to take 4 weeks to get our trousers back on, having spent a year in pajama bottoms and tracksuits. So you get a chance to make sure that you're dressed from the waist down, not just the waist up. We have some questions from the audience, which I'd love to be able to throw over to Sarah to please share.
Yes, Shrey asks, do you believe there will be a transition or a rise in chefs for rent concept? If so, do you believe institutions can leverage this to truly extend themselves into consumer homes, hearts, and minds?
Barb, I'm going to let you answer that one. Chefs for hire.
I guess my first thought was yes, because I do think that unfortunately, as a result of the pandemic, that there are a lot of really super talented chefs out there that are either unemployed or underemployed. So I do think that that is going to be a thing. You know, we're starting to see private events where chefs are creating their own private events, or consumers are seeking them out for specific events. So I do think that there's an opportunity there. With regard to whether it makes it to packaged goods in the grocery store, I don't know about that. I think that would be a really interesting thing to think about. You know, for sure, celebrities offering their name to packaged foods has become one way to get attention, at least in the US. And so we're seeing a lot of that happen. But I think there's, you know, these types of questions are great because they start the wheels rolling in my mind about, you know, how could we utilize this as a source of inspiration and innovation?
That's great.
Let's take another question, Sarah.
Yes, Jennifer asks, what is the one most interesting thing you have learned about food in the past year?
Alex?
The one most interesting thing about food. I think what we heard a lot from our consumers a lot was how they were kind of seeking to experiment and learn new skills. So we've had, you know, people talking about, well, I really want to use this time to master Indian cookery or the perfect sourdough loaf, or, you know, we had the crazy banana bread craze and all those things. But I think kind of the thing for me has been like the food has been there as entertainment and building skills and keeping me sane and bonding with my family, you know, when we can't go out. And I guess under it, it's just like the power of food to connect people and to kind of keep them going through what has been a horrible year has been probably the big thing for me, really.
Right. And Barb?
I would say, to me, the thing that really interests me and has surprised me is that just the blurring of the channels of food delivery. And, you know, we've been talking here about the difference between grocery stores and restaurants. And I think that in the future, we're just going to think about it as food, like one holistic industry, because this blurring that has happened and really been accelerated over the last year is that right now you can get groceries delivered from your local grocery store from a certain number of third-party delivery services. And then you can get restaurant food delivered to your home from a certain number of third-party delivery services. And they're all sort of meeting in the middle. And what we see in the future is just that there is food on demand via your device, anywhere you want it, from any part of the food and beverage industry, quickly, safely, at affordable prices. And, to me, that is it just opens up so much opportunity for innovation across channels, across technologies, across types of food. And to me, that's so exciting.
Brilliant. I must say as well, I love the fact that you're saying you can also have delivery without sacrifice of quality because of all the innovation in that regards. Demian, do you want to do a quick thanks before I wrap up?
Thanks. No, really, thanks to both of you. I know Anita's got something to say, especially Barb, 4 or 5 a.m. for you getting up, doing the show. Thanks so much. Super appreciate it. And Alex, I know how busy you are. Take the time for us. Thank you. Anita?
And I must say to you both, this has been a really, really exciting segment. You can tell when Demian and I get overzealous about asking you questions and we think we have to go to the viewers, But thank you both enormously, especially Barb. You can go back to bed now. So thank you for being with us. My only complaint about this session, I am starving talking about food for this long. So thank you both very much for all you're doing and how you're changing the food that we're all living with. So thank you for joining us on Rise.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day, guys. I'm just so happy we could finally do this show because I've been talking to Barb about this for probably 10 months, saying I want to get her on the show because I think, she went into this company right after we graduated from our master's program together. And obviously now she bought the company now and runs it. But she's been doing the same thing for so long. She's such an expert at this. And she says every week is different because it's always about creating new foods or finding new ways for companies to make this. And I always give this as an example to my students about just something that's so interesting, such an interesting part of the industry. You don't realize people actually get to do this.
Absolutely. I'm surprised she's not 300 pounds because I think for all she's involved in, but 2 great guests. So thank you to you for bringing them to the Rise stage, but great conversation, but I am now really hungry. So,
well, maybe we can move on. So it's time. Grace, what's on the agenda for today?
Today's debate is it too early to test the safety of large events? Anita, take it away.
I'm taking it away because I'm saying, yes, it is absolutely too early. I showed the example earlier with the headline with the baseball match game. I forget what it was, 38,000 people, full capacity, including children, open air, but still technically compliant. Why am I saying yes? It's way too early for 3 reasons. Firstly, it's irresponsible when we still know that COVID-19 is a global pandemic. One city might be one thing, but it's about also the broadcasting and what that does. It's extremely dangerous. You don't want to become a spreader event. And the CDC discouraged major events, which we're talking about sport, concert, etc., not small weddings, from doing this because ultimately when you go to a sporting event, they're saying it's about droplets, the danger of droplets in proximity. When people are singing, when they are chanting, when they are cheering, there is a higher risk. Second reason, the reliability of the new protocols, actually being able to put them in place to keep distance, no way when you're at full capacity, not a chance at all. Thirdly, which is really important, the psychological impact. And I was watching some of the news coverage from Toronto of the baseball match. And people in Ontario, which is going into a 3rd wave, almost on the verge of lockdown, getting freaked out, seeing this full stadium full of people, the venue just being unnerving to watch, even though all the Canadian teams are grounded in the US because there are no events taking place in Canada. So for those 3 reasons, I just think it is irresponsible, both at a medical level and at a psychological level. It's too early. We can wait a little bit longer.
Look, I agree with you. These big, huge events with 38,000 people who aren't controlled is wrong. What we're talking about are these controlled events where we say we're going to let in 5,000 people to a concert. All 5,000 people will be tested before they come in, and then they'll be tested 2 weeks later. And we're going to compare them to 5,000 people that wanted to come to the concert, that got tested but weren't allowed in, and let's compare their transmission rates 2 weeks later as well. And through this, which has been taking place now for several months in Barcelona, it's taken place in Germany, it's taken place in the US, I think in the UK as well, they're finding that if we control and make sure that people are not positive through the test or that they've been vaccinated, there isn't really any transmission of the virus, especially any more than in non-controlled environments. And so this is a signal to, hey, we can actually start to have some events as long as we put in these safety measures. And these have all been done with government officials, with epidemiologists, with doctors, and they've proven that we can start to have these bigger than wedding, but smaller than 38,000 random people who haven't been tested type of events. We've been locked down for a year. When is going to be time for us to do that? Without these kind of experiments where we allow some venues to try to hold these kind of events in these safe ways, without that, we're never going to really be able to reopen. The world's not going to be fully vaccinated for years from now. So when is that moment going to be there? So through this kind of testing, these kind of experiments, we can design the safe venues and experiences going forward to allow these poor businesses to reopen and to allow people to venture out and start to live these experiences that we all have this pent up demand for.
But these are not university lecture halls where you're spacing away seating. These are highly social, highly emotional congregations of people where even if they're socially distanced in the stadium, in the venue, when they're going through the entries and the exits, the fact remains you're creating the condensing of people and contact. And just because someone's vaccinated doesn't mean they're not going to get it. It just means that they're insulated in terms of the degree to which it can affect them physiologically. I'm talking about two things. There's the healthcare crisis, but psychologically, we've all been rewired to stay apart. We need to be really cautious of setting a precedent of suddenly saying it's okay because of the optics. Very dangerous.
But setting a precedent by saying, look, people, if it's done correctly, if you've been vaccinated, if you've been tested, and you are safe to be in contact with other people as a result who share that similar characteristic that they've tested negative, etc., then you will be in a relatively safe environment. And so psychologically, you can venture out again and start to rejoin society. So I actually think it's a critical way to demonstrate to people that we can gather again. I guess that slide is telling us it's time. Grace?
Okay, it is time to vote. Do you agree with Anita? It is too soon. It's irresponsible when COVID is global, don't want to be seen as a spreader event and discouraged by the CDC. Or do you agree with Demian that we can start to have events with safety measures? And when will it be time to reopen? The world's not going to be fully vaccinated. We just need safe venues and safe experiences.
You can see Grace was a teacher in her former life.
She's so good at that. Oh my gosh. All right, let's see those results.
Bravo you. Bravo you. Well done.
But I absolutely agree with you. I would not, I'm a huge baseball fan. I would not go to a game with 38,000 people who are random. So there's a right kind of event, right kind of experimentation taking place.
Indeed.
Anita, want to take us home and wrap this up?
Indeed, we are heading towards a very, very special episode. 2 weeks' time, April 26th, we're celebrating turning 1. We are hitting the anniversary of our first episode of Rise. Really, really special occasion. And a massive thanks to everyone who's joined us. So please do join us. We're celebrating 1 year of Rise and counting. Next time we get together, April 26th, same program, same joy. In the meantime, please check out, as always, Rise Weekly 2020 at gmail.com is our email for what you want to tell us you want to see in season 4. Please don't forget to check out Rise and Shine, which is our weekly blog that goes out, which gets a little bit closer on the checking in. And as always, rise-weekly.com is our website. It's all there all the time, always there for you to look at past and current episodes themselves. So from my side, before I hand over to Demian, as always, stay safe, stay strong, stay hopeful, keep your hands clean, stay out of those massive venues with too many people, and stay with Rise.
Yeah, everybody, we look forward to seeing you for that anniversary episode, especially because we're going to be joined by many of the executives that have been with us over the last few years. They've got something new to share, and we want to communicate that all to you. So make sure we see you in 2 weeks. Have a great 2 weeks, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Excellent.